Let's look into project designing or project planning. Project designing involves identifying the potential project, choosing appropriate strategies for the project, identifying risks and mitigating actions, developing the project proposal, plan, and budget, and enhancing opportunities for the proposal to be approved. Project planning primarily involves drafting the results chain. Implementation is straightforward from left to right when the plan is already drafted. We have to identify the inputs we need to implement the project activities. Implementing activities will produce deliverable outputs. By delivering these outputs, we hope and pray that these results to outcomes that will contribute to the desired impact of the project. For example, our inputs can be online gadgets, our activities would be online classes, the deliverable outputs would be 14 classes conducted during the semester. We pray for the outcome that the students will acquire the knowledge, skills, attitude, and values taught in the class. We hope this contribute to the competence of the students as they solve complex problems in real life, our desired impact. However, effective designing and planning flows in the opposite direction. Otherwise, all our solutions will be based on the inputs and activities we have. Every problem then becomes a nail if all we have is a hammer. Why didn't the barangay draft an inclusive DRR plan? Why weren't the people prepared for the floods? Why did the school system think that everyone was ready for remote learning? The immediate response is to expose and oppose. Exposing the problem seems to be easy, especially with the information readily available through the internet. However, proposing solutions is another matter. People end up looking for excuses or other people to blame or claiming that there aren't enough resources or it's not their job or that they can only do so much. Maybe these are true. But if you were in the community and you face all these problems, you cannot stop and simply understand the problem. You have to identify practical remedies or strategic solutions. Many find it easier to conduct analysis as opposed to designing. Analysis is relatively clear cut since it is studying the present condition. On the other hand, designing involves imagining a future or innovating solutions. It is usually associated with creativity or thinking out of the box. But in reality, it is more a result of a discovery process rather than creativity. Defining the community's desired impact is the first step in project designing. This sounds easy enough, but similar to identifying the core problem in a problem tree, if you don't get the core issue the community experiences, the causes and effects you map out may be difficult to grasp for the people who will actually use that analysis. Is the desired impact a social enterprise that will increase their income by 20%? Is it a modified community DRR plan that is inclusive? Is it a policy that will provide laptops for school children to attend online classes? Most likely not. This may contribute to their desired impact, but these are not the changes they want in their lives. These may be what the short term projects with limited resources can deliver, but these are not necessarily the long term outcomes that you want. You need to be able to distinguish activities and simple outputs from the meaningful change that people want. This is a common mistake. When you ask the community what is the change brought about by the project, they will often answer that they attended trainings or they are able to produce dishwashing liquid. You need to be able to follow up and ask what changed after that. Then you start uncovering outcomes and maybe some impacts. Now their eyes beam up and say they were able to send their children to school, or they were able to interact more with other women, or they got to know their neighbors better. Do not allow the project limitations to restrict the change that can happen on people's lives. The limitations of the project will be revealed later and will be dealt with accordingly. When you listen to the random stories of men and women in the community, When you experience their everyday struggles and boredom, when you start feeling a sense of hopelessness, this is when you start empathizing with their aspirations. What gives them hope to live? What change in their lives do they want? The goal need not be sophisticated. It can be as simple as having a safe and secure house, having food in their table every day, having children graduate college, keeping their families safe during disasters. Identify it first before converting it to smart objectives or whatever. What is key is that the community can identify with it to keep everyone focused and motivated. The project may not immediately bring about the desired impact on their lives, but succeed or fail, it will create a collective experience of dreaming together, critically analyzing problems together, and sacrificing time and resources together. Finding the long term outcomes or the goals the project wants to reach is key. The next step is identifying the different strategies or causal pathways. These are sets of outcomes with their corresponding sets of outputs. These contribute to the community's desired impact. Often there are multiple strategies employed that would contribute to the desired impact. This is because it is rare that the goal is one dimensional. Dreams are not easily fulfilled by winning the lotto. Now comes the most challenging step in project designing. How do we facilitate the community to develop holistic strategies? Is there a formula or step by step instruction? Sad, Sadly, it is more of an art than a science. But like any art, strategizing improves with practice and discipline. Here are some pointers in identifying possible strategies. First, review the findings and the process in the previous phase of situational analysis. This provides context specificity. Community members are able to identify better if it is based on their own context. Next, recall your own experiences in handling similar cases. Gathering lessons and insights from previous strategies will help sharpen identifying strategies. However, be conscious that not all communities are the same and that your experience may not necessarily be applicable or identifiable for the community. Of course, recalling experiences is challenging if you are still new in project planning, but just be conscious to learn from each project development experience, since this will build up your own set of lessons and insights. Lastly, research on existing tools, frameworks, and documented best practices. What have others learned? How did they strategize? Some of these frameworks are elegantly designed and daunting, such that the usual reaction is simply to use them immediately in any setting. These frameworks and tools should be informed by the situational analysis again. The objective is for the community to design their own holistic strategies. You can offer existing frameworks or tools or use it to facilitate community planning processes so that they can analyze for themselves if these are applicable or not. Einstein said that problems cannot be solved by the same mindset that created them. This does not mean that solutions should be separated from the problems. In actuality, the dilemma is that the solution is sometimes too distant from the problem. Solutions are sometimes created unaware of the mindset or how the problems were socially constructed. We need to understand how hidden and invisible power narratives keep the poor disempowered before we can imagine ways to enable their power. We need to identify how socialization processes create gender constructs before being able to transform gender relations. We need to understand how underlying issues progress into unsafe conditions before defining disaster risk reduction interventions. So let's review our lessons in situational or context analysis. We discussed how there are two approaches. The problem-based approach, as exemplified by the problem tree tool, allows us to identify issues using the logic of cause and effect. This allows us to identify shallow symptoms and underlying root causes. This points us to identify practical solutions that address symptoms to provide immediate remedies. Without addressing these felt symptoms, it may be difficult to motivate people to collectively work on the more strategic issues. Note that the uncovered underlying issues may require several strategies to be substantially addressed. An asset based approach, as shown by the Sustainable Livelihood Framework, allows us to analyze a system of assets, structures, processes, and risks in a community that enables them to thrive. Using systems thinking, we are able to analyze how the ability to access and control different forms of assets, to influence decision making structures, and to anticipate hazards, define community contexts. These direct us towards a multiple set of needs based, rights based, and risk based solutions that the community can attempt. Let's use as an example a disaster risk reduction goal to have vulnerable communities live with dignity and respond successfully to the disasters and risks they face. Looking at hazards and vulnerabilities, strategies can be developed through participatory risk assessments and setting up early warning systems and conducting contingency planning. In terms of community assets, engineering solutions to protect critical community assets, provision of redundant power, water, and communication facilities help enhance physical capital of the community. Natural resource management through collective action can be initiated to protect natural capital. Community organizing and networking can be conducted to unite and strengthen vulnerable sectors in the community. Community education to build DRR awareness and skills training to establish a pool of life saving experts in the community can be conducted. Community health systems can be improved to be more accessible and functional during crisis. Enterprises can be introduced and life saving and savings mobilization can be done to enhance financial capital. Participatory governance can be advocated, and pro-poor DRR policies, programs, and budgets can be lobbied. Of course, not all strategies need to be done. Priority areas can be identified depending on the practical and strategic needs of the community. Other frameworks can be applied based on your research. For example, the Yoga framework of action provides clear cut strategies that you can work on depending on the needs of the community. Outcomes, outputs, and activities can be identified on strategies around risk assessment, disaster preparedness, vulnerability reduction, knowledge management, and DRR mainstreaming. Interestingly, we get similar strategies using the Sustainable Livelihood Framework, but using different categories. A tool that has been helpful for me is outcome mapping. Outcome mapping differentiates strategies that either directly benefits community members or directly changes the enabling environment. These are further classified into causal, persuasive, and supportive strategies. Causal strategies causes changes direct to the community or to the enabling environment. These include the community early warning systems, enterprise development, safe shelters that has an impact directly to the community. For the enabling environment, community facilities enhancement, natural resource management, DRR policy advocacy, participatory governance, changes the structures to governance systems. Persuasive strategies builds up knowledge and capacities either individuals or the community as a whole. These include community education, community organizing, participatory research, risk assessment and DRR planning, policy research. All of this persuade people to do causal strategies. And then there are supportive strategies, which encourages continuous learning or solidarity for a community's cause. Outcome mapping actually highlights the value of capacity development and the role of peers and other sectors in creating sustainable solutions by distinguishing persuasive and support strategies from causal strategies. These are all just examples on how to identify different strategies. Review, recall, research. These help you master the art of identifying holistic strategies and causal pathways for project designing. Any questions?